folks, I'll just pop the Notestock link in the chat. If you can add yourselves as attendees, that would be great. I'll give it another minute or two, let people trickle in. All right, looks like we stabilized. I think we can kick off. First order of business is who would like to be the scribe? I am luckily excused from the studio as it looks like I'm chairing today.
I can give it a shot.
Thanks, mate. Okay, so the next part of the agenda is new faces. Is there anybody who would like to introduce themselves as a new arrival?
Hey, my name is Aditya. I'm familiar with some of the people in this meeting, but I haven't been to one of these before. I'm a PhD student at NYU, one of the maintainers of Intoto, and I heard that some of the work we're doing on the Intoto side of things was becoming relevant to this group, so decided to come by.
Cool. Welcome, Aditya. Anyone else like to introduce themselves?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. By the way, let me know if there's too much background noise in the family. But hi, nice to meet you all. I've seen your video before. This is my first time on this meeting. My name is William. I work for a consulting company called Trailfix, and I've done a lot of work in the past on package ecosystems, specifically around PyPI, Homebrew, and related parts of both imaging and Python ecosystems. So I'm particularly interested in tools and ecosystems like Fixway, continuing our work there. So I would talk to you about that.
Just a note, William, your microphone is not great. It's very quiet. But welcome. Anyone else like to introduce themselves as a new member or returning member after a long period?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
Go ahead.
My name is Luis Caro Campos. I work for JFrog in the Conan team, and I'm one of the people responsible for Conan Center, the C++ package repository.
Now your microphone's a bit too good, William. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Seth.
Yeah, I'm Seth Larson. I'm the new Python Software Foundation security developer in residence. So I've attended these meetings in the past, but I'm now attending in a different capacity. So
welcome. So awesome to see that. Any other new faces or returning faces who'd like to introduce themselves? No? Okay, good. All right, next one on the agenda is update on the Great Repository Audit SIG. I've assigned myself this one. Although, Jonathan, if you wanted to give an update, that might work better. I'm not sure which one of us should do it.
Hey, everybody. So the Great Artifact Repository SIG meetings have been running along smoothly, and we have been actively discussing funding it through Alpha Omega. I guess Michael Scovetta, do you want to take, or Amir, do either of you want to provide any updates or thoughts to the wider working group about the direction of the Great Artifact Repository audit?
Sure, happy to. Hi everybody, I'm Mike. I think what at least my thoughts have been kind of circling around have been, ecosystem, like systemic parts of open source ecosystems, meaning, for example, like the Ruby Gems infrastructure, the Ruby Gems, like the gem, like client side, whatever parts of that are service side running within the infrastructure. These things are all like almost by definition the most critical parts of like the Ruby ecosystem, and similar for every other ecosystem. Alpha has a mandate of like going after and proactively like engaging and trying to help be as secure as they can the very most critical open source projects. You could argue that infrastructure is not an open source project, but it supports it, so it's good enough. I think and we're recording this, so I should have my facts in order before I'm talking, but I believe that the engagement that we have with PSF includes an audit of some sort of PyPy. So we're kind of already in that game. So the idea here is, instead of running the Great Repository Audit as a separate thing, we rely on this working group and perhaps critical projects, and perhaps best practices, actually, now that I think about it, to kind of come up with the, if we could just do one a quarter, like what would the first one be? What would the second one be? What would the third one be? What's in scope? What's out of scope? I know, like, on the list, there was some discussion over like the Drupal plugin ecosystem. Is that important enough, large enough, critical enough to be on this list? Like, where does that fall? I'm sure that there were really interesting edge cases. Yarn, is Yarn a, is it just, well, most people use NPM, so like no, or is Yarn widely used enough that it should bump up over some others? Obviously, we have limited funds too, so we can't do everything. We certainly can't like commit to doing like every part of this every year or two. But I think it would be nice to start with 1, 2, or 3 over the next, 4 months, and have a security audit done, fully engaged. This is not an adversarial thing, but work with the project to identify interesting places, and whether it's code review or active pen testing or whatever's needed, try to get each ecosystem to a place where everybody feels really good about it. There's separate discussion within the Great Repository Audit about more I don't know what to call it, adversarial, but like
Pen test, red team engagement.
Yeah, right. So the question is like, is that necessary? Should we just wait for that until we get the first parts done? I think we should, but I certainly would love this group to help guide me and guide AO in the types how to structure these engagements to maximize the benefit for all. And certainly I'm super cognizant of the fact that a lot of these ecosystems are not corporate backed, and therefore don't have like piles of funds to do a lot of this work. So as part of this, we want to make sure that we reserve enough so that way if X issues were found scanning an ecosystem and they're like, well, great, we're all just volunteers and this is like 38th on our list, we can say, well, we can pay to get those things done because they're really important to us. So we want to be in there for both the detection and the finding. I think the Reds team stuff might be a third category, a third priority, and therefore not as well funded, but that's kind of what we're thinking. In no way is this a commitment that AO is doing this. This is just my, it's how I feel today. We are going to be chatting, I think we said next week, to kind of put a little bit more rigor behind it and have a kind of a commitment that like we really are all in on this. Expect the answer will be yes, but we should have that conversation and then come back to this group and say, so in a few weeks, I expect to come back to this group and say, can you give me the top 3? And is there anything special that, as opposed to just a standard security audit, that, they make sure that they worry about like dependency confusion and 2-factor auth on maintainers or X, Y, and Z. And that way we can make sure that those are part of the each engagement. I'll stop talking now.
Zach.
Yes. Michael, there was a couple of topics of discussion at the last meeting. I'm not sure if you had a chance to catch up on. One was initially the scope had been envisioned as infrastructure and code base. And now with pen testing and red team exercises, we're looking to sort of add on this idea of like testing what policies are in place, particularly around maybe like password resets or other sort of like account recovery procedures. There are other ways of testing policies in place.
Yes.
In particular, I was thinking of something like, not that we would do a SOC 2 audit, but something akin to that framing where we say, hey, here are the list of policies that we would expect a registry to have in place. Do you have those policies?
Yeah.
And then let's randomly sample some examples of when that policy should have been followed and then see if it was followed or not. So that's something I think we should consider as we consider how we want to test policies. And then the other thing I wanted to point out again is that we have previously done a survey of registry ecosystems, what security capabilities they have and where there are gaps. And so if a registry wants to go through with the audit, absolutely, by all means, let's do it. But we actually already have some information about where there are gaps in security capabilities for existing large registries. And so if we think there might be funding available, we might also consider going to that and sort of putting together a prioritized list of like filling in those known gaps from the survey this group already did.
So both of those sound great. The first one off the top of my head, like if you were pushing me for like a decision at the moment, I think I would say we push out SOC 2 stuff a while until we feel good that all the low-hanging fruit's kind of taken care of, because for a number of reasons, but at minimum some of it just soften the message to not come in and like knock, hello, we want you to get a SOC 2 audit, and they're like, whoa, what? If we've been working with the ecosystem for a year or two, and there are either lessons that obviously I think, and this is what you said, but like bring from a SOC 2 type audit thing and say, it'd be really interesting if you had like, authorization logs for checking out secrets, and like, things like that, where it maybe just be a really big step for some ecosystems to deal with. But for the second part, absolutely. If we know that there's a gap, I certainly don't want to pay someone to tell me that there's that same gap. So maybe the prioritized list is actually, for ecosystem X, fill gap Y. For ecosystem Z, there aren't significant gaps, so therefore let's move on to the audit part. Because I hope that the audit part would be on finding new things, or I guess in the fullness of time, validating that nothing egregious exists. That'd be my take. But William?
Yeah. Also, sorry for the microphone issues earlier. Hopefully, this is much better. I was just going to say. So, just for some context, Trail of Bits has 2 audits planned, both for PyPI, which I know Seth already knows about, and then we also have one planned for Homebrew. And so these are both. If everything goes smoothly, these will both happen this summer. And so hopefully, both those reports will definitely be public. And so we can definitely share those here. And those may help be a guiding reference for like we've done similar audits in the past, and so
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of like what we find and also how we issue guidance to these open source projects that have limited resources.
That's awesome. What's the what tends to be the scope of the audit? Is it the hosting infrastructure server? Is it the client as well? Are you looking at source code? Are you looking at running systems? Are you including stuff like the CDN that like is host like? I mean, you know, the infrastructure like for behind the server, if you just test that, but you don't test it in the context of the CDN that it's running behind, then you may miss like cache poisoning vulnerabilities and stuff like that. So what ends up being the scope that you end up looking for? Because that's awesome that you guys are already doing this stuff.
Yeah, for these two, the scope is just limited to the code base of the package index itself, and then some infrastructure around it. So for Homebrew, we're going to be looking at the way, so Homebrew is sort of unusual in that it uses entirely GitHub Actions. It has no other server-side state. It only uses GitHub Actions and GitHub packages for delivery. And so because of that, we're going to focus the infrastructure audit there primarily on how it uses GitHub Actions and how it uses GitHub packages. But we won't probably dive further into whether those services themselves are vulnerable to, say, cache poisoning. And then on PyPI's side, we're going to focus primarily on warehouse, the code base for PyPI, but also we're going to spend a bit of time looking at cabotage, which is warehouses, Kubernetes deployment infrastructure setup and like scaffolding. So both of those, but we also probably will not look at Fastly or any of the other CDN stuff for warehouse and PyPI. Right.
I mean, I'm not necessarily concerned about like Fastly itself or whatever the CDN is itself, but I'm mostly, for example, HTTP request splitting, right, is one of those vulnerabilities that only really appears when you're looking at how the CDN interplays with the backing server and stuff like that. Like those are the kinds of vulnerabilities that, like, if you're just looking at the source code and you're running it locally on your own machine and testing against that, you're going to miss the ones that, like, when you're running in a live system, these are the vulnerabilities that can also appear.
Yeah, absolutely. We will be taking a look at the live PyPI. So we haven't fully scoped it out yet, but the plan for these audits, typically what we do is we pin to a hash for the actual code review. And then for actual live review, we will run against the running version of the site.
Okay.
And so we'll say really at the state, we observe this behavior.
Have you already done audits of previous, like, you know, other artifact servers in the industry, or is this the first time that TrailBits has taken a crack at this?
I'm not sure if we've done artifact servers before. We've done a lot of open source audits before. So we were involved in the Kubernetes audit that the OpenSSF, I believe it was the OpenSSF funded in 2019 or 2020. We've done audits of OpenSSL, curl, wolfSSL, and other large packages in the past.
Is this I'm curious if the PyPI audit that TrailBits is doing, is this self-funded or is this funded by some other organization?
It's funded through the Open Tech Fund, if you're familiar with them.
I'm not familiar with I'm familiar with OSTIF. Or is that not, that's the same one? OSTIF?
No,
different one. Yep.
Yeah, Open Tech Fund is a US government outfit.
Nice.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm really glad to hear you guys are doing that. That's like spectacular. So when do those kick off? The PyPI and what was the other one that you're doing?
Homebrew.
Homebrew. We were working on a list of questions and areas that we wanted to see explored. It's not a massively long list, but it's like, hey, like these are the kinds of vulnerabilities that like we want to see covered because of the particular risks of and the way that artifact servers are implemented, right? So, you know, dependency confusion. One of the things that I've seen often is like, you know, login CLI, sort of like when you type in like, you know, brew login or like, you know, npm login or whatever, those sort of like like sometimes the authentication there gets, I found cross-site request forgery and those sort of login flows, stuff like that. So those sorts of areas that may be specific to, like, you know, you've got code command line tools mixing with web technology, those vulnerabilities may appear a little bit. So we had a couple of those, and we can definitely provide you that list. But if you guys are already thinking about these attacks and like various ways of attacking supply chain stuff that you want to explore, we would like to try to make sure that we've got a consistent set of like tests that we're trying to make sure get covered across the entire industry. So if you are able to share some of that knowledge from your side of like things that you think you'll be looking for, that would be really valuable for us to try to make sure we cover for all the industries in all the tests we're doing.
Yeah, we could definitely share that. I think something that we've historically looked for and we found lots of bugs around is caching layers in CI in particular. So you'll see
Mhm.
inadvertent caching between release and staging or release and individual third-party PRs. And so third-party PR can do a poison cache attack.
Sorry to cut you off,
Yes.
fellas, but in the interest of time, I want to make sure we have enough time for the next two items. In terms of next actions, William, you might be interested in the audit repository SIG, which meets on, I think, Mondays.
Mondays at 1 p.m., but we'll not be meeting for the next 2 weeks because of 4th of July, and nobody's going to show up on the 3rd. So
Yes.
so we're
Great,
meeting,
thanks.
yeah. But if you have not seen the document, the Great Artifact Repository Audit document, it's linked in the chat. I'd love your insights and feedback on that, and then I will post in the Slack channel the link to the set of tests. There's 2 tabs, both the red team engagement, things we want to be explored, and the pen test, things we want to be explored. And if you have things that you've thought of or that you think should also be added, I'd love to hear your thoughts and have you propose additional things to put in that document.
If I can make one more suggestion real quick, I would like to use this working group as the funnel point so that, for instance, we should not be engaging homebrew to do a security audit. And even in small organizations, I would be afraid of starting out 2 threads where we're just not aware of the other. So I'll coordinate through this, anything that comes out through AO, but I'll check back anyway in a couple of weeks.
Thanks.
Awesome.
So moving on to any other business, there's been some agenda items added. First one is adding build provenance for all registries doc. I'm not sure who this is. They didn't put their name on it.
Sorry, that was me. I'll throw my tag on here. So we had quite a bit of success with adding build provenance to the NPM registry. It's been a little over 2 months, and over 1,000 packages have gone and added build provenance. And in addition to open source maintainers, we've been talking to other maintainers of registries about what this would look like in their ecosystem, what sort of implementation issues came up during our adventure, and what sort of design trade-offs we made, or in particular, like why did we choose to emphasize so heavily machine identity and really de-emphasize developer identity. And we've seen RFCs for build provenance in the RubyGems ecosystem and the Rust ecosystem get a little tangled up in this question of like, what do we do about developer identity? So I had written a document sort of describing build provenance at a high level, what sort of implementation questions came up, how we addressed them, with the idea that other registries could use this as sort of as a reference stock or a rallying point. And so instead of having these conversations one-on-one individually and kind of evolving the story over time, having it written down in one place that we could point people at. So if they were interested in adding this capability to their ecosystem, they would have a starting place. And we haven't in other venues published a lot of information about how NPM build provenance was implemented. The CLI part, of course, is open source, but the registry is not. And so I think it's helpful to have some high-level description of some of the design decisions and implementation there. So I shared this with a few folks who I had these one-on-one conversations with, including working group co-chair Dustin Ingram, and he asked that I open up a pull request in the repository. Of course, Dustin by himself does not speak for this entire group, but I wanted to mention that I had done this and get feedback from the larger group.
That's really cool. So is the I'm just looking at it now. This would be sort of documentation that could be referred to by other groups, other folks working on it.
Yeah, exactly. So I've had conversations with people in the RubyGems community, PyPI, Rust, And again, it's in those one-on-one conversations, they were, great and helpful, but unless someone took notes or there wasn't that sort of like durable, referenceable artifact. And then, if something came to mind later, having a place where we could iterate on it and sort of like update it over time. Right now, it is sort of NPM centric, as that's the ecosystem that's furthest along in this process. However, as more ecosystems go through this journey and we have additional points of context, we could also update this document and have multiple points of view, or sort of further describe some of the implementation challenges or decisions that were made by different ecosystems.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you. This is really helpful. I know, yeah, we've had a lot of one-on-one conversations about this, and so having it written down is great.
Yeah, seconded. I think that's fantastic. That looks like a really great document. Any questions the folks had or comments?
This is just from a quick skim of it. So my understanding is that the registry does like a counter signature over the original attestation, right? Is that?
Maybe there's the build provenance, and there's also the published provenance. Are you referring to the published provenance? As
published provenance. Yeah. Okay, got it. And it's doing that with a long-term signing key. Got it. Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that correctly.
I think there's even a item in the future agenda here to generalize and standardize the NPM published attestation.
Yeah, that'll be really nice.
Right.
Because we're probably going to need that for PyPI.
Yeah. And we might again look to the in total group to help us figure out how to standardize the structure of that attestation.
Yeah, on the Total side of things, we have what we're calling Total Enhancement 8.9 that's explicitly discusses how to standardize these new predicates from one ecosystem to the other. So we have to help put those proposals together and move it through the process.
I know I opened this pull request yesterday, but I'm also wondering what the review process is. Probably I should let it sit open for a week maybe to gather feedback. Or
you mean for the predicate reviews?
Oh no, sorry, not for 8.9, for the pull request I opened in this working group repo.
I think we would want to probably effectively give it a month, and that would be this sort of EMEA friendly version of the working group and the APAC friendly version of the working group to have be brought up to speed on it. And then basically we can just go on a voice. This working group is a little unusual in that we have an explicit list of committee members. So we can basically just round up some LGTDMs to adopt it. I think that would be fine.
Cool. Okay, I'll make a note to ensure I attend the next working group meeting as well.
The APAC, yeah. EMEA tends to be more attended because there's just more folks in North America and EMEA. Nature of the beast. But yeah, I want to make sure APAC folks have a chance to take a crack at it. Do we have any more on this topic?
This is mostly tangential, but I wanted to bring it up in this context because it is a generalized, a part of using this generalized form. We were looking at adding SIG store to Homebrew as well, and Homebrew is kind of an unusual case because it doesn't have many publishers. It only has one publisher itself, just the Homebrew CI. And I'm currently working on the technical proposal for that, so I think I'll probably share that with the next working group, since I don't want to drop it at the end of this meeting. But just to put it on everybody's plate, this is something that we think could probably be an instantiation of this standard, and I think would be of interest to people in this group.
Yeah, it's worth giving some background on that tangent, which is that we've talked in the past in this group about standardizing a whole variety of different events that happen around repositories. So for example, there's like the signing, the authorship attestation. But there's also things like it was pushed to the repository at this time, it was published at this time, user's email changed at this time. this, ownership changed at this time, right? These sorts of events that are sensitive and convey many bits, so to speak, of security information, of trustworthiness information, and putting those into the log. So it's something we discussed in the past, and it's kind of good that we have a concrete example to coalesce around. Like the publish event, I think, and the push event will be like the two really big ones to start with, and we can work from there. Oh, and authorship attestation as well.
I'd like to add really quickly, as a caveat, this is super pie in the sky, and to be clear, there's no work that I know of that's going here. But I do like thinking about attestation as separate from provenance, and like a lot of other things that we can attest to beyond provenance. Some of the ones that are top of mind to me are things like malware scanning and attesting to the malware scan. Code review is one that I actually think could be really interesting. To be clear, I don't personally have time to do this, and I don't think my team does, but I think that that's like an incredible opportunity for like third parties or consultancies to build out an index of attestations about, hey, we've actually reviewed this code. For my Google peers, I know you've done a lot of work around like, hey, here's like our island of open source that like we run internally or we validated internally, and that kind of stuff could be attested to as well. I love the idea of people being able to eventually apply policies and say like, hey, don't actually update until it has this set of attestations. Especially when we think about something like an ATO. When I think about our registry and publishing, like time between someone saying I want to publish and actually getting it out there is pretty important. And anytime there's a delay, people freak out and think that like something's broken. And we don't necessarily want to introduce a huge delay between publish time and actually getting it live on the registry. That's something that we want to make super fast. So we don't want to necessarily have something like malware scanning be like in the critical path and be synchronous. But people could, via policy based on their risk tolerance, say, do not update to anything that doesn't have this malware scanning attestation. Do not update to something until it has this code review attestation. And like long term, I'd love to see what that could look like and how that could really change the way we think about consuming software.
I reckon I know what Michael's going to say.
So, have I talked to you all about assurance assertions? So for those of you who don't know, like, again, I'm biased, obviously, but solving exactly that question of like, what activities have taken place under what conditions and who promises that those activities took place, and what policies do I expect to see as a consuming person or organization or whatever, is the motivator for assurance assertions. I know the format in Toto, and I know we need to align there, and it's definitely like late proof of concept. But there's a link there. If that is directionally interesting to this group, I'm happy to put more effort into it. We're trying to drive it through AO, but like everybody, it's we have more things to do than we can do. Even to the point that if other folks would like to contribute, like it's all open source, and it does specifically say things like, I scanned this for antivirus on this date and nothing was found. So what was it?
My hope is that at some point we'll be able to write that through the transparency log and then onto a universal asset graph. But that's just me talking my own shop.
No, yes, but I did talk about Guac with the Guac folks a couple months ago, and I think the idea would be to just attach it to the interesting node so that you can fly around the graph and do whatever.
Yeah, I cut off Aditya. Who's next?
I just want to say that the Toto framework as a whole is precisely targeting that space, Miles. We recognize, distinction between the attestation framework itself and the different predicates, of which provenance is one. And as a matter of fact, we have an open PR right now that I'm trying to drive forward that's introducing things like a code review attestation and dependency review attestations and things like that. So where currently we're looking at something like the CREV project, but I'd also, totally love to incorporate something like cargo wet in there and so on. And the idea is that once we have all of these predicates vetted and, part of the attestation framework, then I personally love to see everyone, organizations sharing the results of any of their internal audits using these attestations and things like that. So we should definitely chat if you're interested in taking a look at, attestations, but not just provenance and all of that.
I think this is the working group for exactly that kind of coordination. We really do want to ensure that there is a common language and a common framework. When I was at my previous employer, one of my sort of only serious goals was to prevent my colleagues in InfoSec from having to run more than one monitor. They should be able to run a single monitor and see everything. So hopefully we can achieve that. Looking at time, we can probably spend another minute or two on this if folks had any sort of final comments or questions. Otherwise, we can move on. We have an update on RSTUF. I don't see Caro here though. Oh,
I'm
there
here.
you are. I'm sorry. Hello.
Hello. So yeah, I come back here to give some update about our stuff. Maybe not all here is aware, but a few months ago, our stuff was adopted. We donate to OpenSSF, and this work group was like the sponsor for that. So I came here back to give some updates. Then I will drop some links on the chat here. So the first thing is we moved from VMware organization, the project repositories, and now there is our stuff organization in GitHub where our repositories are. This is the first thing that I want to share. The second thing is that about our roadmap, that we are really close to our first beta version that we call minimum working version. Related to TUF, what it will be able to do, it's TUF administrators will be able to add artifacts or targets, how they call it. Also do some really important maintenance, for example, do the metadata update, rotation of keys, everything on that. So we are very close to that. As we are very close, we also submitted together with Lucas from New York University, that is a TUF maintainer. We created the draft PR to PyPI using our stuff. We had a work before that we tried to use the new Python TUF, and before that, William also did some work on that. So this PR is a draft using the beta, almost beta version. Because why I say almost beta, because we have 3 components. 2 of those components are beta already. One, it's missing some small features that we are about to merge. So everything is in review now, so soon we'll have that. And this PR is a suggestion for example, for PyPI adopting our stuff as the TUF infrastructure. So as a service, yeah. So one more update. Now it's something that's interesting. There was in Open Source Summit North America, there was a very cool presentation from Marina and Aditya that's here in the call, and they used our stuff as the TUF repository implementation for that. So I would like to share this it's about in total, but our stuff was there. So very nice presentation. And I need to say also that it was very useful for us because it gave us some kind of feedback. So we have already some new features planned to our stuff. Then you can go, because by design, our stuff was started with focus in PEP 458 for PyPI. So when I was watching this presentation, I had some ideas for new features that then we can really go beyond PEP 458 design, but also implementing PEP 480 and giving more flexibility for our stuff users to design the metadata delegations. So this will be very cool. And the last one that update that I want to do here, it's yeah, we'll be presenting at EuroPython this year. A presentation about PEP 458, a solution not only for PyPI. Then we will demonstrate, of course, PyPI using warehouse using our stuff, but we go also to share another kind of repository that's not related to, let's say, package only, because when to show how our stuff can be agnostic about which kind of artifact you want to protect using TUF. So yeah, those are my updates for our stuff project. I will be back here soon for more updates, of course.
It's pretty exciting. I guess just quickly for folks who don't know what PEP 458 are, could you give a potted summary?
Yes, first, yeah, sorry for that. Yeah. First, we need to talk about the TUF. TUF is a framework to protect content repositories from different type of attacks. It uses different roles, but we use the basic that it's key signing, but it goes. It's a really a powerful framework to protect content repositories. So PEP 458 is a design. It's an enhancement for PyPI warehouse. Then they will use TUF as a metadata to protect the PyPI clients, right? So then when one of our tries to implement PEP 458 in warehouse, we had the idea to detach all the TUF services from the warehouse, creating a TUF repository as a service in the way that others could benefit from that, not only PyPI, but any kind of repositories that they want to use the PEP 458 design. So the PEP 458 design has a explicit definition about roles, delegations, and keys, how it will be used to sign this metadata. Then we started the idea of our stuff was on top of that. Of course, now we are already planning going beyond to that our stuff can be more flexible in not only to approach the PEP 458 design, but users can have flexibility to design their metadata delegations. Not sure if I was clear enough. Sorry for that.
I think that helps. Any questions or comments from folks? Or are we just all stunned by the completeness and progress? Zach.
Just a quick comment that I think this is great. You know, the PKI is a notoriously hard problem, and TUF appears to be a really elegant solution for ensuring people can reliably check signed material from package registries and be able to survive some sort of incident where those keys might need to be rotated.
I get the vibe that everyone's just like, yep, that sounds great. Were there any other sort of questions and comments folks had? If not, I'll throw it open to any other business in the time we have left. Although please check it on the agenda so we have a place where the notes are being kept. If not, we can nick off and get 14 minutes back. There being no takers, I'm going to call it done. Thank you everyone for attending today. Very productive call. I look forward to the next meeting, which will be the APAC time. We'll see you all there, I'm sure. And I hope everyone has a great day. See you later.
Same to you. See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
all.
everybody.
Absolutely, welcome.